Hi, welcome to Cycling Inform's weekly cycling tips. My name is David Heatley, and in this episode we're going to be talking specifically about wheels. Now don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. We've also got a weekly email newsletter that goes out with these cycling tips in it, so if you have the opportunity, please subscribe to that as well. Now, a couple of weeks ago I got an email from a chap that wanted to know all about wheels, and he's asked 4 questions. The first one, aluminium versus carbon. The second one, how profiles make a difference. Third question, number of spokes. And the fourth question, does weight really matter compared to aerodynamics? So that's what we're going to be covering off in this installment. Now, the main difference between carbon fibre and aluminium wheels is weight and robustness. Now, aluminium wheels are generally more heavier than carbon wheels, but they exhibit more robust qualities. Now, the other main difference is the braking surface on these rims. Now, carbon fibre wheels require a specific carbon brake block. And the reason for that is that the normal brake blocks that we use for aluminium rims are too harsh and they'll damage your carbon fibre rims. Now, if you're running both the carbon fibre wheels and the aluminium wheels in your bike at different times, you're going to run into another issue. Now, when you're running aluminium wheels in your bike, your brake blocks are going to pick up flakes of aluminium. Now, if you then swap over to your carbon fibre wheels and you use the same brake blocks on those wheels, you'll find that these aluminium flakes that are embedded in your brake blocks will start scratching up your carbon fibre rims. So generally the only way around this is to use a set of brake blocks for your aluminium wheels, and then when you swap your wheels over to your carbon fibre wheels, you want to insert the carbon fibre brake blocks. Now, the second question was, do profiles make a difference? So I've got a few examples of wheels here beside me. Here's a Duros wheel. Now this wheel has a fairly low profile rim on it. That's a fairly low profile rim, and these rims are actually a hybrid aluminium carbon fibre rim. So they've got a substantial aluminium rim, and then they've got a carbon overlay on top of it, and that just helps reduce the weight of the rim, makes them quite light and strong. Now then we've got the carbon fibre. This is a carbon fibre wheel, and it has a fairly deep section on it. This is a 303 zip wheel, and here's an example of a zip 404. So obviously you can see that that section is a little bit deeper. So the first thing that you'll notice on these different types of wheels is that as the depth of the rim gets bigger, the wheel becomes more aerodynamic. Now, aerodynamics is great if you're riding along the flat road at 45 or 50k an hour. Aerodynamics, the faster you go, the more important they become. But the issue with aerodynamic rims is that they generally have more mass, so they're slightly heavier than lower profile rims or non-aerodynamic rims. So there's always a trade-off around the sort of wheel that you want. Now, historically, people have gone for lower profile wheels when they're doing a lot of hill climbing to help save weight, and they've gone for higher profile wheels on more flatter rides where they'll be riding faster. Now, from an aerodynamic point of view, you're not going to really see a noticeable improvement until you start taking your bike up over 30 kilometers an hour. Now, as you increase the speed from 30 kilometers an hour, you'll see the aerodynamics become more and more important in the wheel. Now, there's also quite a different number of profiles that you can get with aerodynamic wheels. Now, in recent times, the profiles have progressively changed and they've become more wider at the base of the rim, and then they go into a stouter, fatter sort of aerodynamic shape, as opposed to the classic sort of V section that we used to have previously. Now, there's been a lot of research done on aerodynamic profiles and wheels, and what they're finding is that this wider profile, that stouter, behaves a lot more nicely in crosswind situations. Now we come to the topic of spoke count. Now the mass of the wheel is critically important to the time that it takes to accelerate it up to a nominal speed. So the heavier the wheel, the longer it takes to accelerate it up with the same amount of input. It's just like a flywheel. So if you've got a really heavy flywheel, there's a huge amount of energy you need to put into it to get it up to speed. Whereas if you have a lighter flywheel, then it doesn't take much energy to get it up to speed. Now spoke count increases the mass of the wheel. So the more spokes you have, the more mass that you're going to have in your wheel. But the other issue around spokes is the aerodynamic drag. So the less spokes that you have in the wheel, the more aerodynamic it is. Now obviously there is a trade-off with reducing the amount of spokes that you have in the wheel, because the less spokes that you have, the more flimsy the wheel becomes. So it's important to get a well-balanced wheel with a good amount of spokes to make sure that the wheel is robust and strong. Now this becomes particularly important for heavier riders and also racing cyclists that are spending a lot of time sprinting out of corners or in straight lines, or even track riders. Track riders ride on very robust wheels to ensure that when they're putting a lot of power into the bike, that the wheel's not going to flex underneath them. The other thing that you'll notice with spoke count is that if you've got a flimsy wheel, when you start going around corners, you'll find that the bike won't track very well. Now the big question, does weight really matter as opposed to aerodynamics? Well, this is a big question and it really depends on your riding. Now aerodynamics are important, like I've mentioned, when you start riding above 30 kilometers an hour. So again, if you are riding a lot of hills, then generally you want to get a wheel that is less aerodynamic but lighter. And if you're looking at doing a lot of flat road riding, then a more aerodynamic wheel but maybe slightly heavier is going to give you a better ride. Now there's a lot of wheels that give you a good compromise between the two, so they give you some aerodynamic qualities, but it's still packaged into quite a lightweight wheel. So those sort of wheels give you the opportunity to be able to climb quite speedily as well as ride along the flat. Now before I finish up on wheels, I just wanted to touch on the different types of tyre and wheel combinations that we have available. Now the classic wheel has a clincher rim. So that's a rim that attaches to a tyre that's open at the end, and the rim basically, and the tyre hooks on to the rim, and this is very similar to what you have in the car. Now these obviously run an inner tube in them, and that's a clincher type wheel. Now there are two types of clincher type wheels. There's ones that are tubeless, and then there's a standard clincher. So this is a standard clincher, but the tubeless system operates similar to what your car operates on, and that is that it runs without an inner tube and it relies on a sealing type of gluey, sort of creamy, pasty, fluidy stuff that you inject into your tyre to seal the gap between the rim and the tyre. The other type of system is what we call tubulars or tubs, and they are a complete tyre. Now they glue onto a rim, and they're round, so the inner tube's inside these, they're sewn up at the bottom, they've got rubber on the top, you glue them onto your rim, and they run in a concave type of rim, not a clincher rim, so they're a different type of tyre. Now when we were racing years ago, we used to always ride on tubular wheels, and the reason for that was that at the time the clincher wheels weren't or the clincher tyres that were available and the clincher type rims were quite heavy. But nowadays the clincher rims and the tyres that we're putting on it are very similar to the tubular systems, so there's not a lot of difference between them. Now tubular wheels are always going to be lighter than clincher wheels, so there's always going to be performance improvement, especially when you're climbing hills if you're running tubular wheels. The only big issue about tubular wheels is that they're a pain to set up. You've got to glue the tyre onto the wheel, and if you've got a puncture, you've got to rip that tyre off and put a brand new tyre on it. Now the weight saving that you get and the performance improvement that you get from riding from tubulars is somewhat negated if you're having to carry around an entire tubular tyre with you when you're riding. Now when people ask me about what's the best way that they can make their bike faster. The first thing I say to them is change your wheels or upgrade your wheels to something lighter, stronger and faster. Now the reason for this is that wheels are a rotating mass. Now anything that's a rotating mass, if you are making it lighter and stronger, then you'll get a great performance improvement, and that is better than any static component that you've got on your bike. So there you go, everything that you wanted to know about wheels. Now if you do have any questions about wheels or anything else, please use our contact us form on our website. So thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed these cycling tips. My name's David Heatley from Cycling Inform.